All right. Now looking at crafting text. So essentially, this is changes as of last year for year 11. So you all would have studied crafting text last year. Hopefully, nothing too difficult to understand. But essentially, teachers and schools choose a framework or a broad idea as the focus for this assessment task. So essentially, it's almost like a theme or some kind of big idea that you will have to write about and you will have to examine in other texts to inspire you how to write. So things like future, bravery, human connection, belonging, storytelling, surrealism could be anything, but in year 12, the choice is from a specific set of four frameworks like country and specific mentor text. So if you're studying a certain text, the mentor text may be specified by VCA that they want you to look at. You engage in creative writing, but the creative writing is purely of your own creation. It isn't, an excerpt of that you wrote to fit into the book. It's completely your own creation, but the way that you depict the framework in your own work, let's say your framework is belonging, the way that you wrote about belonging has been inspired by a few different authors or one author of a certain text type. So you may choose to write in a different text type, but try to reproduce that theme or that big idea in the same way that that author did, okay, or in a similar way. And then you do write a statement of intention for the SAC, not on the exam, but for the SAC, where you write about how the mentor texts have inspired you, how you noticed that they represented this framework in their text, and how you chose to stray from that and how you chose to replicate that in your own work. So essentially, the main skills are being able to closely analyze texts, being able to work with different text types and be aware of different text type features, being able to write in various modes, and creative writing. So, genre features are important. Bit of a cheat sheet for you guys. As you can see, you've written out all of the main sort of text types. These are the ones that you could realistically write a shorter piece for a school-based assessment slash exam. Okay, I haven't included like novel. A lot of the mentor texts that you will look at will also be, shorter. You can be looking at things like short stories, letters, poems. You can even look at something like a song. And they can all be something that you can use. And I've put some of the main genre features for you guys, so feel free to have a read through. Hopefully, I feel like a lot of this is intuitive after you pay attention to it. Like, you just need to analyze one little text of a certain text type until you fully understand what these genre features are. Back to the pyramid of structural devices, characters, themes, views, and values. Now, I did say that you will need these skills all year, and we can already start to see the overlap. But for this area of study, just like for text response, you need to be able to work with all of these four elements and include all four elements in your work, except this time you have to do it as the author yourself. Think about how you will make all of these things apparent in your piece, in your crafting text piece, and how you will also be able to analyze them and link them back to your mentor texts with regards to your framework in your statement of intention. Essentially, you become an author, but you become an author that's still taking things from other authors, okay? So it's not so bad. For students that struggle with creative writing, be systematic in how you break down these mentor texts and literally take things that you like from them and do them in your own way with a slight change to them. If you feel confident being creative, even better, you can completely put your own spin on things. So let's imagine you've been assigned a framework like belonging, okay, and you understand, you've broken down the idea for yourself, and you kind of understand everything it could possibly be about. You've then gone and read up on it. Now you get a mentor text that you will have to use to write your own creative, for example. How do you prepare to take this mentor text and analyze it? So first of all, you need to break down the text type for yourself. We said this mentor text is a short story. Okay, so short stories have the least structure. For in terms of creating creative writing, they're one of the easiest and most common choices made by students, and you may choose to do this for your crafting tech stack. It only needs a few characters and dialogue, some plot development, and there is lots of flexibility. There's lots of flexibility. There's no set structure. You can do third person, third person. There's lots of mentor texts that are suitable to inspire your short story. They may be short stories themselves. It can make it easy to incorporate your key theme, to incorporate your framework in a very clear way. And they do have interesting language devices and techniques that you can include, because this will be something you are assessed on. You will have to include some language devices in your creative writing, and it's easy to do with short stories. And it's almost automatically interesting if you do it well, because it combines dialogue, thoughts, descriptions, and plot development. Now, what else do you need to know about this text type? Now, commonly, short stories can be structured in a specific way. We commonly see a single plot from one person's point of view rather than seeing multiple perspectives or plots. And the plot typically follows with an exposition, a description that starts off the short story. Then has rising action. In some way, it tries to slowly build and accumulate tension to make it more interesting. It has a climax where the tension is at its peak, something has happened, and it's followed by a resolution at the end. The tension has fallen, and there's some kind of conclusion to everything. So, typical structure of a short story. They're centered around themes. That's why it's so easy to incorporate the required framework. If you're writing in a short story format, oftentimes it's presented as some kind of challenge or struggle or conflict. So that's how you could incorporate your framework there as well to make it be the center of everything. Okay. There's conflict that the character has to overcome. I do suggest, if you're writing in short story format, base this around, uh, incorporate that framework, base it around the conflict. It's description focused. You need to be able to write really good descriptions. Use the five senses when you write your descriptions. Um, Try to describe things in interesting ways that make the reader feel like they're there. And descriptions and dialogue mainly drive plot development. Dialogue especially drives the plot. Okay. Now, characterization is crucial for short stories. There should be lots of implied, hopefully, information. Um, Implied is always better than obviously stated information, so make lots of things um, obvious, but in an implicit way. You can choose the perspective that you want to take. Um, and first person point of view will probably work better with a lot of frameworks to make it clear the main character's perspective and relay more ideas. A first person perspective would usually be better for a crafting text task. And basically, remember, I said, let's imagine our mentor text is a short story. Let's even imagine that, for the purposes of your SAC, you lack this short story and you were going to write a short story too. So, before you read every single one of these mentor texts, you need to be all across those text type features. So now you familiarize yourself with text type features, you can actually read the short story thinking about if you were the author of your own crafting text piece, you took inspiration from this. How could you write your piece while adhering to the genre conventions of a short story as well, and while adequately incorporating your framework? So this is just an example of how you may closely analyze a mentor text, okay? Uh, so we see that it starts with a bit of a hook. Yes, she said, it's incredible. It's an abrupt start rather than just having an exposition there. The exposition follows next, and it makes it easier to spark the reader's interest. It was quite stupid of people, she thought, to make everything, even conversation, so interrelated and dependent that she could not say merely that it was incredible, but must be referring to something preceding or obvious. Nothing exists, she thought, unless it depends on something previous. People are incapable of realizing anything that does not bear upon that interrelation. In that case, it was the number of warm days that was incredible, instead of anything more important, and there seemed to be so few important things, she thought desperately, besides the weather. So there's lots of exposition. It's revealing that the protagonist of this short story, that has not been named, um, has huge perspectives on the world and people. It's revealing that she thinks people are quite generally plain and boring and have no depth to them. They have no understanding of important things, in a sense. People are incapable of realizing anything that doesn't bear upon that interrelation. Nothing exists unless it depends upon something previous. If it doesn't depend upon something previous, these people don't care about it. So it's revealing her perspective. It's describing her internal world. So, through the context of, let's say, looking at the framework of belonging here, it makes it clear that she doesn't exactly feel like she belongs already from her thoughts. Okay? It's clear that she is sort of isolated, maybe due to personal choice from being close to other people. She views herself as separate. I like it though, said her mother. There, her mother liked it. In the pattern which existed around and in and was part of her mother, there was a place for liking the weather. Look, said her mother, she's there again. We see that the dialogue is driving plot progression. It introduced another character, and it introduced something else. She, whatever she is. And that's building tension because we don't know yet who she is. Thus, something outside the pattern was only a subject for comment, never as real as the weather, never as permanent, only a subject for look. She's there again. Again, she's criticizing um, her mum's perceptions now. I thought she had moved, and a good thing too, said her mother. No better than she should be. Decent people expected to live with a woman like that, more than a person should be expected to put up with. I suggested to the landlord that he put her out. Again, it was not the concreteness of the act of forcing a woman out of a house that was important. It was the fact of mentioning it to the landlord. What a queer interpretation you put on things, mother. So this again reinforces that idea that the daughter really disagrees with people in general and her own mother. She senses this prejudice that her mom, as well as other members of this community, other people living in this building, the prejudice that they have for this unnamed woman. And she doesn't think that the woman is deserving of it. She does find it cruel, but now two people sort of don't belong. The woman, the unnamed woman, has been deliberately excluded, and internally, our protagonist feels she doesn't belong or agree with most people. Okay, so we see, thus, imagining that this is about belonging, how it has been depicted, and it has been depicted through a conflict, that there is a clear difference in perception between the mother and the daughter when it comes to this social exclusion of the woman. That's what relays the framework of belonging in this short story and how it's been constructed. Now, there's a bit of a climax, the peak of their disagreement. Queerter refused to live in the same house with that woman, and now she comes and stands on the corner. On the corner. The corner was important, more important than the woman. A bit of bit ironic there. And there's description then to slow the plot progression because the climax has already occurred. Um, and a bit of contemplation included there. Basically, it sounds sarcastic, these few lines where the protagonist examines why, the woman isn't considered good enough for anything. She doesn't even deserve the corner, essentially, of the street. He nears a resolution where the conflict ends and subsides. There, said her mother, don't blame the poor creature. You don't really know, and anyway, she's to be forgiven. The woman, then, existed to be forgiven, not blamed, not understood, just forgiven. Um, so we see it still centers around that idea of belonging. The daughter still disagrees. She doesn't understand why the woman can't just be accepted or left alone, why she has to be critiqued, why she has to be the topic of discussion. And there's a mention of a clear resolution, and the story then ends. Beautiful. So hopefully that makes sense. So essentially, that's how you would break this down if this was your mentor text, if this was one of your mentor texts. Note the benefit of looking at the text type features first of a short story and how much more that aids your understanding when you break down the construction of the text. Okay, and in a way, this is exactly the things that you need to be planning for and thinking about for your own writing. So if you took inspiration from this specific short story, you would be aiming to create this internal voice that's, critical of everything, sarcastic, lots of internal description of emotions. In a way, a lot of it is quite implicit, it's implied, not obvious. So if you like that style, that could be something that you take. You could also create a character that doesn't feel like they belong and doesn't feel like they want to belong because they feel like people are all wrong. Okay. So just finally, your considerations. You need to plan themes. This needs to be part of your plan. That should all be around your overarching framework. The framework has to be the most prominent in your piece because this is what you're assessed on. Now, look for views and values. Decide what message you want to relay. What's your moral of the story, or just in general, the opinion about something that you want to make clear from your work. That opinion or moral of the story can be around your framework as well. And it's a lot better if it is, because of course it should connect to the theme. So you would be thinking, my theme is belonging. How do I want to depict it? How will I achieve that? What message will I make clear that I have about belonging? Plan your structural devices. As we mentioned, these must be included. Don't use cliches. Don't use those generalized sayings. To overcome, if you really struggle creating language devices of your own, take the inspiration from your mentor text. Use what you like that they did to create your own thing. So you could take that internal dialogue from the short story that we looked at. You could take the sarcasm and put your own spin on it, and those would be your language devices, for instance. Tension as well from the short story we looked at, and just a few tips. In general, aim to write as if the plot is happening in real time, unless your genre requires the use of past tense, such as a diary entry. I recommend for description, to make it better, use language that attacks the 5 senses rather than just showing the reader what they see and what the setting looks like. Instead, describe it through the five senses. So if you were there, what would you hear, or what would you smell? What would you see? And you may just choose to do a couple of those or one of those. And we see a pretty description here. He yells over the intense ambient noise of conversation and snippets of discordant soprano sax. That's just using those auditory descriptions, but it makes you feel like you're there. You're in this noisy, bustling, busy environment. Um, and avoid explicitly telling your character's emotions. Never say, oh, character is nervous. Instead, describe how you see that. He's shaking his foot, quivering his lips, flickering his eyes. So describe physically how the character changes so the reader can imply what they're feeling. Make sure you're adhering to conventions of dialogue. Any new speaker gets a new paragraph and new indents. There should be a comma, or you can use a dot as well before the closing indent. Limit continuous dialogue. It should be short, because you don't want to make it appear as if people are talking at people, talking at a wall, rather than with them. They should both have a say in the conversation. And if you think about natural conversations, you take turns speaking, okay? So a good rule is less than 3 lines per speaker. Vary your sentence lengths. If you have a look at this example, lots of longer sentences being used here, or it's just one sentence, I think. You can use long sentences to reduce tension, to create a slow pace, sense of relaxation, relay emotions like romantic, nostalgic emotions. Um, and then vary and mix it up with short sentences when you want to create tension, a fast pace, make it stressful and dramatic. Choose whether you'd like to write from first person or third person, and I've detailed it a little bit here. Like I said, it may be easier to relay a framework with a first person perspective, simply for the fact that you can get into so much more detail with um, the character's emotions, and it will still be subtle. You can still make it subtle, but it's still very optional. And some narrative techniques to make things more interesting. You can mix up time to make your story more interesting. This won't work for every text type, but if you are writing a bit of a story format, diary format, it does work for a lot of text types. And some things you can do are like freezing time, stopping time to give more information, looking ahead, flashbacks, and changing the pace. And you can do that for your sentence lengths as well, as we looked at. To create a nice start and end that are not only interesting but wrap together quite nicely, you can use bookends, where the first line/lines of your piece begin some sort of idea or technique, and the very last line or lines of your piece actually finish the idea or technique that was used in the beginning. So they're like two halves and they complete each other. Um, and we've look at an example here. If we started with, she looked deep into his eyes and wondered how they'd ever ended up together in the first place. And then we finish with, she looked deep into his eyes and wondered how she'd ever been without him. All right. So I think I've covered all of these things, but hopefully everyone has a bit of an idea what to do for this crafting text area of study and some things you can do in the meantime. And again, don't forget about techniques. I've added just some names here, some interesting ones to think about. All right, now our short